Determine all critical numbers for the function f of x equals sine of x plus cosine of x. Critical numbers are the x values that make the numerator and the denominator of the derivative equal to 0 and are in the domain of the function. The first thing to do is find the domain. F of x equals the sine of x plus the cosine of x. It is made up of two terms, the sine of x, whose domain is all reals, and the cosine of x, whose domain is also all reals. So the domain will be all reals, or negative infinity to positive infinity. The next thing to do is find the derivative. F prime of x equals derivative of sine is cosine. The derivative of cosine is negative sine. We now set the numerator equal to 0 and the denominator, if there is one, equal to 0. Solve for all x's. Let's add a sine of x to both sides, so cosine of x equals sine of x. We can now divide both sides by cosine to produce a 1 equals sine of x divided by cosine of x. And sine over cosine can be rewritten as tangent. So we need to think of all locations where the tangent is equal to 1. One of these on the unit circle is pi over 4. That's in the first quadrant on the unit circle. The next one will occur in the third quadrant on the unit circle when both the cosine and sine are negative, so the tangent equals to positive 1. That will be 5 pi over 4. And then around the unit circle it'll happen again and again. Nicely, tangent is pi periodic, so once we find one value, we can add n times pi with it, and that will generate all of them, since tangent repeats itself every pi. Where n is any integer. We can get a common denominator between these two if we want to write it another way. It can be written as pi over 4 plus multiplying this term by 4 to give it a common denominator of 4 will be 4n pi over 4. And it could also be written as, by factoring out the pi and the 4, 4n plus 1 will be left over times pi all over 4. We want to make sure that these are in the domain to be critical numbers. The domain here is all reals. And pi over 4 plus n pi, or 4n plus 1 pi over 4, are real numbers always for any integer n. Therefore, all of them are kept, and those are our critical numbers for the function. Pi over 4 plus n pi, where n is any integer.